Spoilers for episode 2. I've already done a review of episode 1, so if you're interested in watching that first, go over there. It's in the description down below. But for now, let's get stuck in. Episode 2 has very similar problems and strengths to the first episode. Well, the strengths are easily how it looks, the set pieces, the environment, and how it's filmed. They're all incredible, really fit into the books and immerse you in the environment. The weak points are still the same. Well, the first episode was very much dedicated to just destroying the male characters, giving them massive flaws, no strengths, and elevating the women, making sure that everyone understood that the women are perfect and the men are useless. That's kind of carried on over this, and to the point where they actually set up something which never existed and was somebody else's fault, just so they could attack one of the men. But what this does is cause major problems for the story. There are huge strengths in this episode that weren't really in the first one. They just pick up entire set pieces or stories and just put them into the TV series. Those are all the strong points. Those are the best written parts. But because they can't show the men being capable, lots of the set pieces which are meant to train them or improve them are completely cut out. And so to explain how they get into a scenario or how they handle it, they come up with another reason. And it's always those reasons which are the weak parts. Anytime the writing strays from the book and goes into their own sort of creative path, it's always a weak point. It's always poorly done. It's just blunt and obvious, and it treats the readers like they're idiots. There was a nuance to the books. It treated you like you understood, like you could handle sort of subtle hints and put together pieces, threads together yourself. This TV series has none of that when it strays from the books, when it strays from the actual text and the writing and the script of the books. It simply goes off into a basic drama. And while I can understand that you need to change the books to make it into a TV series to some degree, there are some parts where there's no need to do it unless you specifically want to elevate a certain person, lower someone else, or send a different message. And the issue is, I like the books because I like the message that it puts forwards. And so far, this entire series definitely wants to send a different one. And this is what I mean about one of the strong points of the series. If anyone read the books and imagined what it looked like, you'd come to something very much like this. It's very ordered and rigid, and it just looks perfect. The issue that I have is that the White Cloaks never really felt like the White Cloaks. These were essentially religious zealots. They were supposed to be rabid. There's points in the text which is like literally they feel different. They feel wrong. They feel like frothing wild animals. And it just doesn't come across in this. What actually comes across in sort of when you meet this questioner is that he's just a basic sadist. There's nothing to him. He's not extra deep. He's not doing it for a good reason. It's just he enjoys pain. He even talks about how it tastes nice. It's weird and it's missing, and the White Cloaks to me just come across as flat. They look great. The entire environment of it, I think, is awesome. But I don't think this is what the White Cloaks are. And then you've got what the White Cloaks were doing, and obviously, I think that some in the White Cloaks would have just been sadists and it would have attracted them. Even among the rest of the people, they did it because they thought that they had to sort of purge the world of something. Whereas this is just like, yeah, I'm having too much fun doing what I'm doing. And I don't really think that's what the White Cloaks should be, especially on first introduction. Now, the ferry scene itself was bizarre. This was a pivotal moment in the books. This was where they came out of the village that they'd never seen anyone outside of or been outside of forever. They were incredibly naive. And yet, they met their first people, and Lan really knew who these people were. He knew that weakness was provocation, and that actually you had to appear strong in order to not get attacked in the real world. And this opened their eyes. It made them show that actually people outside are not good people and they will attack you. And so he made them put on a show and make them look as if they could actually defend themselves. This wasn't just opening their eyes that this is what the real world is like and you have to be able to defend yourself. He was also giving them a skill. This was their first training. That if you actually wanted to pass through the world, you had to look as if you weren't weak. It showed almost a way of bluffing something, and it taught them how to look like that. Whereas in this, none of that happens. After this scene, they are still the same useless farm boys that they were originally. They learn nothing. There's no training here. All of that is skipped over for no reason. It wouldn't have taken any extra time or any extra effort to put that bit in the scene, and yet here, it's gone. And it seems to be gone because they don't want to show that this ferryman was a bad guy. Instead, the only lesson that they learn here is that if you pay people, you'll get a service. And if you pay more money, you'll get the service faster. It's a very odd way of teaching anyone anything. And then we get to the end, and it's even stranger. Because we see that the Trollocord is there, and Moraine casts a weave in order to sink the ferry. But stupidly, the ferryman goes on when he could see it sinking and being torn apart, and just jumps on it. So now it looks like Moraine has killed him, which actually was never part of the plan. It was the ferryman that was at risk to them, and it teaches an entirely different lesson. Now, I do like the exchange of glances between Lan and Rand at the end, and it really shows that Rand realizes what is going on. He's now seen what Moraine is willing to do in order to get what she wants, and Lan understands that back. All of this is exchanged in a glance. They both set up their sides, that Rand has realised he's in trouble here, and Lan has already sided with Moraine, that he knows that what that guy's thinking, but he will still protect Moraine at any cost. That is a great moment, and it's all done in a glance, and it's probably, for me, one of the strongest parts of the episode. But the message from the scene is very different. We go away from thinking that, oh, well, Moraine will actually send him money to replace the float, and it's actually not her fault, and she hasn't done anything wrong. So now, she may have killed a bloke. Except for anyone watching, all you can think is, that ferryman was an idiot. That boat was sinking. What were you doing just swimming out on it, you lunatic? So to actually come back and blame her for it just comes across as everybody not understanding what they've seen with their own eyes. You cannot come away from this scene thinking that the ferryman is anything else but a moron. But you're meant to. And that really doesn't gel well for me. And so you have two major issues here. They come across and they haven't learned anything. And you think that the wrong person, the guy that dies, is a moron. So at this point, you're meant to think, like the characters do, that Moraine will kill someone who gets in her way. In fact, they say as much. That's not what you think at all, because you know that's not her fault. You can see that's not her fault. And you just end up thinking anyone that thinks that is an idiot. Now, as they stop in the woods, you see Moraine go through the horses, and she's actually giving them more energy. It doesn't explain it as much as I think it should do, in the fact that although they feel like they can run further, they can't as such. Eventually it will catch up with you. It's sort of drawing strength from within yourself, and you feel refreshed, but eventually you would run yourself to death. It's not as good or free as I think it is, but it shows that she gets weakened after the magic, and that is good. Now, during this, in the actual books, Lan actually teaches the three boys sword fighting, how to defend themselves. It's an important part of the training. That doesn't happen here, and it has knock-on effects later down the episode, so it's very, very weird scene to cut out. This idea that the men can't be powerful, the men can't train, and that everybody should be able to fight, oh yes, of course we should have the women fighting as well, has led to them cutting out that scene, even though it's an important one. Because it shows you that the boys can defend themselves. And when they get into situations where they need to, what are you going to do? Are you going to have them suddenly just be able to magically do it? Or are you going to have it where you've shown in advance that they've already been trained and they have some skill because a warder taught them? Instead, what we get is where Moraine comes into Egwene and takes her off into the woods. And this is one of the strong points for me. This is a scene which is basically straight out of the books. A lot of the text is the same, a lot of the speech, and how she actually guides her through it. This is the bit where she goes through and goes, oh, you killed somebody on the ferry. And it's like, no, you're just a moron. Everybody that watched that scene knows that he killed himself. Saying it doesn't make it any better, and I don't know whether you were watching the same show we were, love, but it's not making you appear very smart. But it is a great way to actually lead into the three oaths that Aes Sedai take. The issue I have with it is she's now only told Egwene, so the boys don't know about that at all. You'd think that'd be kind of important to the plot, that if you're going to tell one person, everybody should be on the same page. Because otherwise now you just have Rand, Mat, and Perrin who think she can lie and attack people and everything else. It seems a bit important to me, but I'm not the scriptwriter. But she does go through sort of the basic Aes Sedai test, which is from the books, where it shows that she can use the one power. It's a great scene overall, and one of the strengths is just, this was from the books, so they didn't have to write it themselves. And this is something you keep coming back to. All of the best bits were just taken wholesale, and you think they'd learn. If all of your strongest scenes are from the books, then just copy them. But the weakness of this scene is one of the things they changed, and I just feel like I'm repeating myself, but it's true. This scene in the books was done from Rand's perspective. He saw Egwene go off with the Aes Sedai Moraine into the forest. Now in this, he just sees her and lets her walk off. very weird. But in the actual books, he follows them and he sees this happening in front of him. And it made a lot of sense because in the actual original text, everyone from the Two Rivers thought Aes Sedai were evil. They thought they were dark friends, that they worked for the Dark One. And so he was worried about Egwene, and he followed them to see what on earth was going on. Why are you doing these secret meetings out in the woods? But in this, none of that happens. He can't follow them because they actually removed that from the original episode. When you make one plot hole, it leads to bigger ones further down the line. The fact that they couldn't show or even hint that women actually did something wrong, well, now we've missed a very important part of the scene. Like, now, Rand has no reason to be suspicious of Moraine. All he's seen is a guy basically swim off into a river and die of his own volition. It doesn't really make any sense for him to. So he couldn't follow her into this, which is why it makes even less sense when it goes forwards and he actually starts having bad dreams. When he has bad dreams and he pulls a bat out of his mouth, he accuses Moraine of having caused it, which would have made sense if he actually had the myth that the Aes Sedai were evil and that they were the ones that caused the breaking of the world. But in this, there's no reason for it. He's just accusing her for absolutely no reason, apart from jealousy that she spoke to Egwene in the woods. It's not very strong. The character arc isn't as strong, and it kind of ruins the whole aspect of it. It's coming across more as a petulant child. Now, I did like the whole, you see Lan come to her defense, and he just stands in the way, and just his mere presence is enough to actually stop everything happening. While Rand's walking aggressively at Moraine, just Lan actually being there and stepping in the way is enough, because his presence is very intimidating and it's enough for anybody. I think it's a great moment. But then Moraine actually does some sort of reverse psychology on him. It's like, well, if you don't want me to be here, I will have to leave you behind. I'm just going to go off and you can make up your own mind. And she leaves with Lan. But then Egwene comes out and she's like, yeah, she's absolutely right, and I would leave you behind if I was her too. Just completely out of nowhere. And it's like, what, she has one talk with you in the forest and now suddenly you're best buds to the point where you will leave your lifelong friends, someone that you were in a relationship with, and just say that to them? Completely out of the blue. And it's even worse than the fact that, okay, so you talk to her, you know that the ferryman wasn't her fault and everything, but that was only explained to Egwene. The boys know nothing about that. They don't know about the oaths. As far as the TV series is meant to make you think, those people think that the ferryman dying was her fault. So you get a weird situation where they're completely justified in their beliefs, and Egwene comes across as a moron, even though she has a different opinion because she's been told information that they had no possible way of knowing. It's bewildering, it's badly written, and none of it should have been done this way. All of this could have been led up to very, very nicely. It all could have been impacted. Even from the first episode, you could have laid the set stones for this kind of meeting just by putting in the original sources in the first episode. But by cutting those out, by making it seem that Moraine was perfect and could do no wrong, that Egwene was perfect and could do no wrong, and that the women must be together, separated from the men, well, now you've written yourself into a dark, dank hole, which you can't get out of and doesn't make any sense if everyone actually understands the various different motivations of the characters in the scene. But despite that, this scene actually does end quite strong. Matt is the one who actually, out of all of them, was reasonable about it. Yet he comes forward and goes, look, we're being chased by Trollocs, mate. We kind of need someone that can throw fire and protect us. It's like, yes, base survival, it's very Matt, it's a good idea, and it makes a lot of sense. And so they convince them, and they all go away. Now, the nice ending to the scene at the end of it is after the boys all go off and they ride off into the forest. If I just hide my camera a sec, you can see that Lan is actually waiting in the trees at the back, because obviously Moraine was never going to let them go. You're not going to let them do anything like that. It was definitely reverse psychology, and if they hadn't followed, they would have been made to follow. But at this point, the boys have actually made their own mind up to do something, but were completely manipulated into doing it. They think it was their own idea, even though it wasn't. That is one of the things that Moraine was always good at, and at least in this it shows you, even though it was written in a rather clumsy way. Then we get back to the White Cloaks again. Look, the White Cloaks in this are even less like the White Cloaks I would have expected. They're all a mixture of, you've got one side who are very sort of calm and formal, and you've got the questioners who are, I don't know, he's putting his hands all over it, and I don't know whether this is just meant to be some kind of weird, creepy feeling that you're meant to get off him, as if, oh my god, he's touching her and he's not meant to. It's very bizarre. It's not something they used to really do. Now, obviously, in the story, like, she's got armored shoulder pads and stuff in there that maybe you could think, well, that's suspicious. but the very sort of creepy way he's going all over her back and putting his hand on her back and everything, utterly bizarre. I don't really think it fits, and it certainly doesn't fit the White Cloaks. You know, when I think of the White Cloaks, the sort of creepy idea isn't want to get off them, but it's what I got from this, and I think it's kind of the wrong message. These are people who are supposed to be just rabid zealots for the light. Anyone that they think steps out of line, whether it comes to morality or anything else, you're a possible dark friend, and you'll be sent to the questioners to find out. That's what I wanted to get from them, this sort of dangerous, you're always a hair's breadth from getting tortured kind of line. The strangest part of the entire scene was the ending of it, where they find out that Moraine is injured. And then what the leader of them goes, well, we try to avoid Aes Sedai, which is understatement of the year. And he says, but if you want that healed, you're going to have to go and find one on your own, because those are the only people that can heal that. And I'm like, no White Cloak would ever say that in a million years. A White Cloak would not send you to an Aes Sedai. They thought they were evil. They thought they were dark friends. It's like going to your doctor and him going, well, you know, we don't actually have medicine for what you've got, but if you go to Satan and make a bargain with him, then he'll be able to cure you. It's not going to happen. That's never been medical advice. And these are such religious zealots. They have such zeal. They are so fervent and just rabid in their beliefs. They could not possibly even consider telling you to do that. And honestly, if I was in the Wheel of Time and one of them said that to me, my only feeling would be that is a trap. Because that is definitely not something they would suggest lightly. Certainly not in such an offhand manner as this. At this point, Moraine is even walking around normally. She's not acting like she's on death's door. So he's basically just going, well, you've got a small wound. You may want to go to Satan and get that fixed. From their point of view, that's what he's just said, and it's weird. But the strength of this actually comes at the end of the scene once the White Cloaks have left, because she's come out and she gets accused of lying. You've just broken your oaths. And it's always been a strength of the Aes Sedai. They can weasel around words and make you think you can hear, and make you think you've heard something that you didn't hear. And that's exactly here. This was actually one of the strong points of the writing, and I do congratulate them on that. Everything she said was true, and this is the kind of way they're going to have to write the rest of the series. I want them to keep up this kind of line with Moraine, because in the first episode, she was very blunt, and she just kind of commanded people, and they obeyed. It didn't really make any sense for Moraine, who literally has such a grasp of language that she could talk to you for an hour and you would think you'd had a different conversation than she'd actually had with you. And this, it shows, even to the point where she calls someone her sisters, but because she considers them sisters, that's close enough to the truth that it is true. As long as she considers them sisters, she can call them her sisters to them. And that shows one of the things, that something doesn't actually have to be true. They just have to consider it true. And as long as you personally consider it true, even if you're lying, you can still say it. They're not her biological sisters, but she still thinks of them as such. And therefore, it's true enough for her to say. Part was well written. I enjoyed it because it explained to the other characters in the back exactly sort of the limitations of her power and its various nuances. Next to the scene, I think, is simultaneously very strong and very weak. Matt comes out with a song and he starts singing about Manetheren, and the rest of them join in. Now Moraine comes out and says that isn't just a song. Manetheren was a place. It's your old blood. It's where you came from. And she tells them the story. Now that story's ripped almost one for one from the books, and that's why I really like it. The issue is how this all happened, and it goes back to the plot holes and the ideology from the first episode. In the actual books, what happens is they fight the Trollocs, and during that they do a war cry, and Matt comes out speaking an entirely language, the old tongue, which he doesn't know, and none of them knew. This leads Moraine to explain it to him, and it actually goes back and shows that when she says old blood, it's not just blood, it's almost like genetic memory. You are your history, you are the people of your history, and they pass things down just through blood. It's an important message and one that's completely lost here. She keeps saying the old blood is strong here, but it's never explained and never really shown. This is just a song in this, and it doesn't really carry any of the same weight. Now, they couldn't do it in a war cry with this because I've already said Lan didn't train them. So because Lan didn't train them, none of them know how to fight, which means they can't have a fight with the Trollocs. It wouldn't make any sense. So because you can't show strong men and strong men training men to be strong, now you've had to cut out a fight, which means that you have to do this a different way, and it's altogether weaker. we've lost a lot of the messaging, we've lost a lot of the strength and the impact of it, and now they're just singing a song and she's telling them a story. Now, she does also undersell Manetheren's army, which literally was always in the thickest of the fighting the Dark One at every turn. Wherever the fighting was at its most dangerous, that's where Manetheren was. And Moraine in this just goes, well, it was small but strong. Manetheren didn't have a small army. It was a massive raging city. It was it was called the Thorn in his side because it was a massive impact, and wherever they went, they thwarted him. And yet in this, it's like, oh, well, you just imagine this small, like, they kind of thought that because the Two Rivers is a small town, Manetheren was a tiny city. No, it couldn't be further from the truth. So while I like part of the scene, the bit I like was just ripped out of the books, and everything around it, everything they wrote in themselves, I didn't like at all. You lose so much of the character arcs and the development and the training and everything else, and all of this comes back to the same reason. You can't show men being strong, you can't show men bonding, you can't show men training other men. There's got to be some kind of thing. They can't have Egwene being weak and weak in the power with the men also being strong and actually learning something. Because I guarantee if they wanted to train the men in sword fighting, they would have wanted Egwene to have trained in it as well. And that's just not how it went. So instead, we get scenes of Moraine and Egwene together, of her being trained and improved and made more powerful. But the men, it just seemed like the men were lying around, not doing anything. And obviously, that has impacts later down the road. And this will continue to happen until they can get over that, until they can step over that and get past it. We're going to keep repeating the same issues when they start getting in trouble. Now we're like, well, how did they learn to do that? How did they get out of that? This stuff matters, and it's why you should have followed the story. Then we move into some Rand-Egwene relationship drama, and obviously it seems ripped straight out of some kind of high school romance. It's incredibly annoying, and none of this happened. I think this is literally just put in for the Tumblr shippers. I mean, it's the only reason that they made them have the relationship in the start, so they could do stuff like this and just have them, oh, will they, won't they, the entire series. Look, I don't want anything to do with it. Like, she's already dumped him in the first episode, and now she's like, oh, will she, won't she? Oh, we're going to have to make it. And it's all going to be her decision, and he's just along for the ride. And honestly, I don't want anything to do with it. This entire scene, bored. Just bored. Now, we get this rather odd scene where Perrin's out and about, and he's checking his wound on his leg, and then some wolves turn up, and instead of, like, attacking him because they've sensed blood, they just lick him and move on. And, I'm worried about this. I am really worried about this. I hope this isn't sort of the introduction that we have, and I hope they haven't changed something really, really major from the books, because if they have, they've cut out one of the best bits. This isn't how I want Perrin to go through what he's about to go through, and again, this is something they wrote in themselves, and all I feel when I did this is, no, don't ruin it even more. There's no need to ruin it even more, but I have a horrible feeling they're about to. And when I say don't ruin it even more, I really mean it, because if you remember back to the first episode, Perrin murdered his wife. Well, killed her anyway. It wasn't murder. He didn't intend to. And that is a major problem, because in this, he doesn't give a damn. She's not even mentioned. He's barely even upset. There's one scene in this where he's like, oh, well, maybe if I look at the ground a bit, people think I've had an emotion. But apart from that, it's completely and utterly bewildering. This is a character they invented just so they could kill her off in the first episode. And then it's just like, yeah, we just ignored her. It's like, why have you ignored it? Well, she's not in the books. Yes, she's not in the books, so she shouldn't have existed in the first place. And all they're doing is ruining the TV series because they've got to crowbar stuff in. Yeah, we've got to subvert your expectations, and it's horrible, and it doesn't make any sense. How he's behaving in this episode makes no sense after what he's just done in the first one. And when you start adding things in like the walls and everything else, it doesn't make it better, it makes it worse. Every time you compound your own changes on top of the books, each one gets a multiplier of crap on top of the other one, because you haven't fixed your first mistakes, and now you're just adding more in later on, and it's really not one of your strong points. And I don't think they realize if a character actually experiences something different in the TV series than they experienced in the books, then their entire personality as a person should change later on, and then you're not telling the same story after all. You either stick to the books religiously, or you might as well do a different story and not do this IP at all. And that's the issue we've got here. Perrin did something major in the first episode, and we're supposed to think that he doesn't even react to it in the second one. Oh no, he's just fine, he can go through the woods, he's not breaking down or anything else, he's sort of the king of stoicism. It's not realistic, but they can't have him act any other way because this is how he acted in the books. Except in the books, he didn't kill his wife. So we've got an action which should lead to a different person in the later books, but they can't change him because we know the person that Perrin is. It doesn't make any sense, and it can't make sense, and it just leads to strange and odd behavior because they're simultaneously trying to actually stick to the law while not sticking to it at all. At some point, you're going to have to choose, and I definitely choose the law one. But then we get into the episode, part of the episode that I thought was really well done. You've got the fade here, and I know it's not like the books, but I really like the look of it, and I think it sort of nails a sort of more obvious visual representation of what they're meant to be. A lot of the stuff that was how they were written about, sort of the cloak not moving as they moved, you can't really do in real life, so I don't mind a bit of the edits for this. I think it looks great. And then they go through the big chase through the forest, and that's always really well done. The effects in this, I do think, are really nice, and just having a big, massive Trollaccord in itself is very impressive. The way they've actually set up Shadar Logoth with the big wall and everything else, it's just a massive crack into it. I think it looks awesome. Whoever designed this, top marks. Now, yes, again, as they're going through, you can tell they're sort of walking in on a background, and I don't know whether it's a green screen or sort of the technology where they project something onto the wall behind them. But either way, just looking at the actual design of it, awesome. This was a city that just fell to paranoia and darkness, and this whole dank area of it really nails it. Now, later on, it does get very weird, and while I think it all looks good, the actual story of it is probably one of the weaker parts. Because this time they've made it so that Moraine is actually unconscious. And she wasn't in the book. She actually led them into the city. Whereas in this, it's Lan's decision. And that doesn't really make much sense because in the books, Moraine was actually able to set up wards to keep the darkness away. They weren't actually at any risk in there. They were fleeing the Trollocs. The Trollocs didn't want to follow them in, but Moraine was able to keep them safe. As long as they didn't leave the building, they were fine. Whereas in this, Lan's just taking them in with no protection. He comes across as a complete moron. Why are you leaving them into the city that you know is deadly and then just going to an inn and waiting for a while? Yes, Moraine's unconscious, but you could just put her on a horseback and carry them through the city at the very least. You don't have to go and start sitting in there just waiting for the inevitable to happen. It's a bizarre choice and it doesn't make any sense, all because they've incapacitated Moraine for seemingly no reason. The only reason seems to be the line that they come out with later. And while that line fits in with episode 1, it doesn't fit in with what this story is meant to be. Now, the boys go out and they start to explore the city, which makes sense because they're little town folk. They've never seen a city this big. I do think they could have shown that a bit better. These are supposed to be people which went out exploring because they were just so impressed with it. They've never seen buildings this tall before. They should be staring at the buildings even though it's dank and dark. They've never seen anything this massive. They couldn't even imagine a city this big. The Two Rivers was as big as they thought anything could get. Whereas in this, they're just all taking it in their stride. Yeah, I mean, there is a building which is 4 stories tall that I've never seen before in my life, but you know, just another run-in-the-mill day for Rand. But the really weird part is what happens next, because Mat goes out exploring. Now, in the books, they all go out exploring together, because Moraine told them not to. And yet, Mat gets people into trouble. So he gets them along, and they just kind of follow him into risk. It shows a lot about the characters and their arcs and sort of the relationship between them. But in this, Mat just goes off on his own, and none of them have been told not to leave. So he's not even acting sort of against any rules in this. And when you realize how dangerous this city is, again, Lan comes across as really stupid. And it's only stupid because he's been written that way. They've decided to make him stupid. Because in the books, none of that happened. This is something that is simply designed to humiliate Lan and make him seem like a complete moron. And they make that really obvious later on. But Matt goes off and he goes off exploring. He finds this little box, and the box has a dagger in it. Now, he's already been told, don't go out and take anything, don't go out and touch anything, but this is Matt, and so obviously he's not going to obey that. The issue is, again in the books, when the three go out exploring, they go out and they find this big treasure room, and there's a guy there, and he tricks them. He's like, we'll take the treasure outside the wall, and you'll help me, and then you'll get all the treasure, because I can't carry a lot of it. And that invokes Matt's greed. And his greed, like, yeah, we'll go this. We've always wanted this. We can take the money out, and that'll help us defend ourselves. None of that's even here. And it's stupid, because he was like the personification of what happened in the city. Whereas in this, no. He just finds a dagger, and he takes it with him. Doesn't really have the same emphasis or impact that it should do, and that's a problem. You go from having this major plot point, this major arc, something which seriously has great impacts later down the line, and you just cut it because you couldn't be bothered to make a set with some gold in? I don't really know. You could probably do it on the cheap. I'm sure there are ways you could have done it on the cheap, but instead, you just have him find it in a box, and it removes all of the impact, especially as a lot of the rules they were taught, a lot of the impacts they were given, just no longer exist. They're never told they can't go out and explore the city, the dangerous city, the deadly city, the city that everyone knows Trollocs are so scared to go in because it's that dangerous. No, just go out and wander. Lan's not going to tell him. Lan doesn't care. Why would Lan care about some boys? I don't know. But then it starts to improve, because rather than smoke tendrils, because obviously smoke would be too difficult to do, now we've got a sort of a creeping darkness among the ground, which I'm perfectly fine with. And they see it, and it attacks the horse, and they are horrified, and it actually just kind of melts the horse. It looks really, really awesome, and it's very, very well done. But then Moraine wakes up, finds out they've taken her to Shadar Logoth from Lan, and she just goes, "You've killed us all." And I'm like, what? How stupid of you! Like, literally, in the books, Moraine was the one that decided to take them in. She was the one that guarded them all. And so we know for a fact that actually Moraine would have made the same decision. But knowing that, we're now supposed to think that she's going to have a go at Lan for doing the same thing that she would have chosen to do had she been awake. I can understand that you're supposed to change some things when you move it from a book to a TV series, but come on! At least have your characters be the same people. This isn't the same character, this isn't the same person, and the only reason this has been put in is to crap on Lan, because so far Lan has been the only man who's actually manned. This is a guy that was allowed to be the masculine man in episode 1. Out of everybody, only Tam even came close. But now we've got to put him down, because we've got to see that men actually, they're all crap. Everything they do is crap. If a woman had been awake, it would have been fine. But in this, no, the man, he's in charge for 1 second and he makes a terrible decision. Doesn't even tell the boys that to actually be safe and do anything, just lets them roam around in the dark, and obviously, because the man's in charge, everything's gone to pot. When none of this happened in the book, Moraine was the one that made all the decisions. But now we've got to flip it around, because the women are perfect and the men are crap. And that is the only thing you're meant to take from this, that Lan is a moron and he can't even do one thing right. All of this was set up. The only reason Moraine is passed out is to give you that message. And when you combine that with everything else, when you combine how horrible and just uneventful finding the dagger was, they've taken something which had such care put into it. Shadar Logoth looks amazing. The graphics department look amazing. The graphics department and the set designers did an incredible job. And then it's just ruined by the writing. It's ruined by the need to just make, oh man, bad ideology crammed into the story, rather than just replicating what was in the books in the first place. There was no need to do this to Lan, and there's no need to have Moraine do it to him. But no, you've got to put him in his place. Luckily, though, when they're not actually having to write dialogue, the rest of the scene is actually really good. You see that they're separated off into the different groups, and they actually have to make their own way out, and it's actually all really well done from this point on. There's a very eventful chase through the city with the darkness following them, and Perrin and Egwene end up on the wall and have to jump out into the river, while Rand and Matt actually find a big hole in the wall that they kick through and get out. Now, there is a really nice part where Matt and Rand are actually stuck at a gate, where Rand just says to him completely innocently, "You hoist me up over the wall." And Matt's like, "Why don't you hoist me back over the wall?" And already it's sort of foreshadowing what happens later on, and it's a great little addition just in an offhand comment, which really actually shows that when they want to, they can put in some good lines. As long as they're willing to stick to what the actual story is meant to be and what the lore is meant to be, they can do things like that that really enhance what's going on the screen. It's just when they want to do their own decisions, when they want to stray away from it and think they can improve it, that's when the writing has issues. Now, Lan takes Moraine and they ride out through a hole in the wall and are just in the forest. But then Nynaeve comes out and puts this sword to his neck. And honestly, I don't know what's happened to a sword, but whew, that's damaged, that one. That's not a serrated blade, that's just dense. But the most insane part in this is that Nynaeve is supposed to be able to sneak up on Lan, because women are awesome. Now, yes, she is meant to be great at woodcraft and sneaking on things, but Lan is better, Lan is superior, and she would not be able to sneak up on Lan. Nynaeve is not more skilled than Lan at basically anything except using Shadar. But here we are, the little girl from the Two Rivers town is better than literally the best warder to have ever lived. Oh, that one's tough to believe. And there we have it. Some of the parts in this were incredible. Some of the parts were really immersive. The set design, the look of Shadar Logoth was great. But the writing, all they needed to do is take things straight from the book and put it into a TV series, and it would have been great. And it seems like, to a degree, they realized that. They picked up some great parts, and they put them directly into those. And those were all the strong points. But everything that surrounded it, it's just so much worse. And to have Shadar Logoth, the entire setup of it, literally designed just to be able for Moraine to deliver that line, "You've killed us all," to imply that Lan is just an idiot that can't do anything right. No, you really have to stop it. The entire first episode was just filled with that. That was all it was meant to achieve. And you think you've got past it, because it was kind of exempt from most of the rest of the episode. There were some hints and everything else, but overall, they kind of moved on. And then here we are, just reminding you, no, men can't do anything right, women are amazing, and if women aren't around, the men are just going to mess up. Thanks for that. But from a lore perspective, I think overall this episode was greater than the first one. It certainly stuck more to it. It's just, they really have to stop thinking they can improve it. They have to stop thinking that they can send a better message than actually exists. The books are too deep, too complex. They put forward too many messages in very subtle things for them to actually improve on them. Because they just don't seem capable of replicating that when they try and do it on their own. There are some great scenes where they do actually show some intelligence in their writing. The Moraine scene with the White Cloaks being an example of that. But then you have things like the ferryman, where they completely change the situation, and it means that later on it won't make any sense when it comes back to the boys. You've cut out their training, their improvement, you're glossing over huge plot points and parts where you prepare the cast for what happens later on, and so inevitably later on they won't be prepared, and that won't make any sense. But instead, we can't focus on the people we need to focus on. This has got to be about Egwene. We've got to show this. We've got to show it from their perspective. Put the women in charge. Show what happens when the women aren't in charge. It makes certain characters look like morons when they weren't. It makes certain characters look like they can't do anything wrong, when that's not true either. And when you give people this false perception of the characters, you inevitably create problems that don't make any sense and turn people off. There are hints in this which show that they can make a great TV series if they really wanted to. If they can get past that, if they can get over themselves and realize that they need to stick to the source material, the rest of the series could greatly improve. The second series could greatly improve. But the more they try and put their own stamp on it, the more that they think they can do it better. And then, no, we don't have to train the boys to fight. No, we don't have to train the boys about the real world. No, we don't need Moraine to lead so that actually we can't get this dig in as a man. Like, no, we really need to put men down because we haven't done it in the rest of the episode. As long as they can get over that, then the series would be just a million times better immediately. The issue is, if you've read the books, it doesn't really make sense. I can understand that the TV series isn't just for people that know the lore. Fair enough, it's gonna go to a wide audience, okay. But I guarantee you, that wide audience would like the original lore. Whereas with this, you seem almost deliberately destroying characters just because of what dangles between their legs. This is a show which has everything it needs. When you can get something like Shadar Logoth and make it feel so good, When you can get something like the Trollocs and make them look so good, when you can get something like Shadar Logoth and really just bring it to life, you have everything you need to make an amazing TV series. You've got source material that literally just needs converting into speech, and away you go. There are people that could do that for you. The only thing they need to do is let go of their own egos, let go of their own desire to make their work, and instead make Robert Jordan. Because I don't know what this is. I don't know what Wheel of Time this is meant to be, but this isn't Robert Jordan's vision. This is not the Wheel of Time that everyone expected. This is definitely the Amazon version. And I can't say that the Amazon version of Wheel of Time is really what anybody was after. The fans want the original text, and you certainly don't have that here. And all I can hope is that as we move on to the series, they really let go of this rampant man-bashing that they just seem obsessed with. I really hope that they get to show women that have flaws, that aren't perfect, that do things wrong, like they did in the books, like they do in real life, like anyone would expect. Because as long as we do this filtering that no, we've got to have men causing problems and women solving them, this will forever remain a greatly flawed TV series that just has huge plot points and doesn't make sense to anyone that actually exists in reality. But until that happens, the series is going to remain flawed, and that's definitely disappointing. But for now, that's it from me. If you liked the video, press like and subscribe. More videos like this in the future. I will be reviewing every episode of The Wheel of Time until it stops. I put too many hours into the books to do anything else. But for now, that's it from me. Let me know what you thought of the episode down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.